All right, so today
Right.
we're going to be taking a deep dive into 5th century BC Athens,
Okay.
that period
Yeah.
that everybody calls the Golden Age.
Yeah.
Um, and you've given us a really interesting mix of sources, Wikipedia, some in-depth historical analyses.
Right.
And, our mission here is to kind of help you
Yeah.
get the most out of them.
Yeah.
We're talking political intrigue,
Mhm.
artistic and philosophical revolutions.
It's
A society that
bro.
basically laid the groundwork for
Fascinating.
so much of Western civilization.
It really captures the imagination.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
so many famous names.
absolute.
So many groundbreaking ideas.
Yeah, to really understand it, we need to sort of rewind a bit,
Okay.
go back to the aftermath of the Persian Wars.
Okay.
So Athens,
Mm-hmm.
along with a bunch of other Greek city-states,
Right.
they team up to push back the Persian invasion.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And that victory led to the Delian League,
The Delian League, yeah.
which, at least initially, was all about protecting the liberated Greek cities over in Asia Minor.
That's how it starts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a defense league.
Yeah, it's like a mutual protection society.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So as Athens rises within the league,
Okay.
they start turning it into what some historians actually call the Athenian Empire.
So it became more about power than just defense.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So Athens takes this bold step and they move the league's treasury,
Okay.
which was originally on the island of Delos, right, to Athens.
Using those funds to bankroll their own ambitious projects.
You got it.
Okay.
Think magnificent buildings on the Acropolis.
Oh, the Acropolis.
Yeah, for example.
I see why people are obsessed with seeing it in person.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Athens rising.
Mm-hmm.
They're controlling the Delian League's treasury.
Yeah.
And then along comes Pericles.
And then there's Pericles.
Right.
Yeah, Pericles
Wow.
is this fascinating figure.
Okay.
He gets elected general over and over again.
Yeah, what?
He dominates Athenian politics for decades.
Really?
Yeah, imagine a politician who could sway crowds with his eloquence,
Wow.
but also had this like strategic mind
Oh, yeah.
to navigate all these complex political currents.
He sounds like a character straight out of a historical drama.
I know, right?
What was his real impact on Athens, though?
So Pericles put some pretty groundbreaking reforms in place.
Right.
One of the biggest was mystaphoria, paying people to do jury duty.
They got paid to be on juries.
They got paid to be on juries.
How did that work?
Yeah, so this was revolutionary at the time.
Okay.
It meant even the poorest citizens could take part in the justice system
Oh, interesting.
without having to worry about, losing a day's wages.
Right.
Pericles was also a huge champion of this idea that all citizens, rich or poor, should have an equal say.
Okay. In how the government worked.
That's the foundation of Athenian democracy,
It is.
right?
Yeah.
But I have a feeling the reality might have been a bit more.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into the nuances of Athenian democracy in a
Okay.
bit. But it's important to understand that these reforms Pericles put in place,
Okay.
they really shaped Athenian politics and helped create the conditions for that cultural boom we call the Golden Age.
So they set the stage
They set the stage.
for everything that was to come.
Exactly.
Okay, well, since we're talking about Athenian democracy, let's dig into how it all worked.
Okay.
You had citizens participating directly,
Yeah.
but what did that actually look like on a
Right.
day-to-day basis?
Okay, so the heart of the system was the assembly,
Okay.
the ecclesia.
Okay.
Any male citizen
Okay.
could show up to debate
Okay.
and vote on laws.
So like a giant town hall meeting,
Yeah,
but Athenian style.
Athenian style, exactly.
Were they getting anything done with crowds that big? Oh, they got things done.
Okay.
These meetings could last from sunrise to sunset,
Oh, wow.
and they happen around 40 times a year.
That's some serious dedication to civic duty.
I know, right?
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
Did every single citizen really have that much of a direct voice in the Athenian government?
In theory, yes.
Okay.
But to keep things running smoothly, they also had these officials called magistrates.
Okay.
So every year, they would randomly select citizens
Okay.
to handle all sorts of administrative tasks, policing, managing finances,
Okay.
you name it, all decided by drawing lots.
Random selection.
Random selection.
Why would they do that?
It was their way of trying to minimize
Interesting.
the influence of wealth or social status.
Okay.
The idea was to create a level playing field where anyone, in theory, had a chance to serve.
So it's like anybody could get picked for anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Of course, there was also the Council of 500. Okay.
So is that a smaller...
Yeah, so think of them as...
more focused group.
A smaller, more focused group within the government.
Okay.
They were the ones responsible for setting the agenda for those massive assembly meetings and overseeing the day-to-day business of governing.
So they were like the steering committee.
Yeah, the steering committee, making sure things ran smoothly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the assembly sets the big laws. The magistrates handle the daily grind.
Right.
And the council keeps everybody on track.
Exactly.
That's actually a pretty impressive system for its time.
It was really innovative for its time.
Yeah, and it's important to remember all this art, all this philosophy, all this democracy, none of it was cheap.
Right.
Good point. Time to talk about how they funded this golden age.
Yeah, how do you pay for all of this?
Yeah.
Right.
And we know that Delian League treasury plays a pretty big role.
Absolutely. A big chunk of Athens' wealth came directly from those funds.
Right.
Which, remember, Pericles had moved to Athens.
Right.
This didn't exactly make Athens the most popular kid on the block.
Probably not.
Yeah, in fact, some historians argue this was the moment when the Delian League truly became the Athenian Empire.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds like it created a lot of tension.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay, what else did they do to bring in revenue?
So they had taxes, of course.
Okay.
Customs, duties, fines, the usual.
Right.
But they also had this other system where wealthy citizens were expected to contribute even more.
Okay.
They called it liturgy.
Liturgy. Like a church service.
Not quite, no.
Okay.
In this context, it meant that wealthy Athenians would sponsor big public works, festivals, even worships.
Wow.
It was seen as a civic duty, a way to show off their wealth and boost the city's prestige.
So kind of like donating a wing to a museum.
Exactly.
Getting your name on it.
Yeah, you got the right idea.
I could see the appeal.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about Piraeus.
Oh, parade.
Right, that bustling port city. It was a massive trading hub that brought in tons of revenue for Athens.
Right. Imagine ships loaded with goods from all over the Mediterranean, constantly pulling into port.
Athens was at the crossroads of the ancient world.
It was.
So all this wealth pouring in, what was life actually like for the average Athenian?
So surprisingly, even the Athenian elite lived relatively modestly.
Really?
Yeah.
I always picture ancient elites draped in gold and living in giant palaces.
Right, but they actually valued simplicity and public service over flashy displays of wealth.
Interesting.
Sure, there were feasts and celebrations, especially during religious festivals.
Right.
But the Athenian ideal was all about moderation and civic virtue.
No, not quite.
And land ownership was actually pretty evenly distributed amongst citizens, which helped maintain that sense of equality.
So not quite the luxurious lifestyle we might imagine.
Not quite, no.
What about education?
Education was a big deal in Athenian society.
Right.
Boys from citizen families received what we'd consider a well-rounded education today.
Interesting.
They learned to read, write, do math, even play music.
Wow.
It wasn't all about hitting the books, though.
Okay.
Physical education was crucial, too, because they needed to be prepared for military service.
Of course. Athens was a powerful city-state.
Exactly.
And every citizen was expected to be ready to defend her.
Yeah.
So what did that look like?
Lots of wrestling.
Intense wrestling matches.
Okay.
Grueling foot races under the hot Mediterranean sun.
Okay.
They train these boys to be strong in both mind and body.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
A healthy mind and a healthy body.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But what about women in Athens?
So life for women in Athens was quite different.
Okay.
Their roles were mostly confined to the home.
Okay.
Managing the household, raising children, overseeing any slaves they might have had.
So a pretty traditional division of labor.
Yeah, you could say that.
Women did have certain legal rights, but they were completely excluded from politics and public life.
Interesting.
Their lives revolved around the home and family.
Okay.
This definitely raises some questions about equality in Athenian society.
Yeah, it does.
Even during the Golden Age.
It's definitely a topic worth exploring further.
Yeah.
But for now, let's shift gears and talk about that incredible cultural explosion
Right.
that happened in Athens during this time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the golden age we're talking about.
This is it.
Architecture,
The big one.
philosophy.
Yeah.
It all seems to have come together at once.
It really was a remarkable period of creativity and intellectual energy.
Yeah.
Under Pericles' leadership, they launched this huge building program. And the jewel in the crown was the Acropolis.
The Acropolis, that iconic symbol of ancient Greece.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Picture all these skilled artisans, sculptors, and architects working tirelessly to create these incredible masterpieces, all carved from that gleaming white marble.
It's mind-blowing to think about the level of artistry and craftsmanship involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And it wasn't just architecture.
Right.
Didn't some of the most famous sculptors of all time work during this period?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This was the time of Phidias, the legendary sculptor who created those awe-inspiring statues of Athena and Zeus.
Okay.
Imagine these towering figures covered in gold and ivory, reflecting the wealth and religious devotion of the city.
Those statues were considered wonders of the ancient world, weren't they?
They were. And Athenian theater was flourishing too. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, they were writing these timeless tragedies that people still perform today.
That's amazing.
Imagine packed theaters, audiences hanging on every word, and these powerful stories exploring fate, justice, the human condition.
It's incredible to think that those plays have resonated with people for over 2,000 years.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And of course, we can't forget the philosophers.
Right, the philosophers.
This was the age of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
The big names.
Some of the most influential thinkers in history.
Yeah, their ideas about ethics, politics, the nature of reality, they still shape Western thought today.
Yeah, they do.
Imagine the debates they must have had about justice, virtue, the meaning of life, all while walking through the bustling marketplace or sitting in the shade of an olive tree.
It sounds like Athens was a real hotbed of intellectual exchange.
Yeah, it was a really stimulating environment.
It was.
And it's important to remember this cultural explosion wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Right, of course.
Athens' political and economic power played a huge role in fostering that creative environment.
So the Golden Age was really a product of its time.
Yeah.
All these different factors coming together.
The perfect storm.
That allowed Athens to shine on the world stage.
Right.
But as we all know, all golden ages eventually come to an end.
They do.
Right. And for Athens, that end came with the Peloponnesian War.
The Peloponnesian War.
Right. The epic clash between Athens and Sparta.
It's a conflict that completely reshaped the Greek world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we get into the war itself,
I
think we need to go back to that question you raised earlier.
All right.
How did the structure of Athenian democracy actually contribute to its downfall?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
Yeah, it's a question historians have been debating for centuries.
Right.
Athenian democracy, while revolutionary, also had some built-in weaknesses that may have contributed to its demise.
What kind of weaknesses are we talking about?
Well, for one, the assembly, with its system of direct democracy, could be swayed by passionate speakers, focusing on short-term gains.
So were there situations where the assembly might have made decisions based more on emotion?
Absolutely.
Than careful consideration of the long-term consequences?
That could be a real problem, especially during times of war.
I can see that.
Yeah.
What about that system of randomly selecting magistrates?
Oh, yeah.
Was that also a potential problem?
While it was meant to promote equality, the system also meant that sometimes people without the right experience or qualifications ended up in positions of power. Sometimes it worked out. Sometimes it didn't.
It sounds like a bit of a gamble.
It was a gamble.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, during the Peloponnesian War, some of those gambles didn't pay off.
Okay, so the structure of Athenian democracy may have had some vulnerabilities that were exposed during the war.
Yeah.
What about that other question you asked? Was the Golden Age truly golden for everyone in Athenian society?
That's a critical point. While we often celebrate the achievements of 5th century BC Athens, it's crucial to remember that this prosperity and freedom didn't extend to everyone.
You're talking about women, slaves, and foreigners.
Exactly. We already talked about how women were mostly excluded from public life and confined to the domestic sphere. They had very limited legal rights and were essentially under the control of their male relatives.
That's a stark contrast to those democratic ideals we associate with Athens.
Yeah, it's a real contradiction.
Right.
And then there's the issue of slavery, which was a fundamental part of Athenian society and their economy.
Right. Slavery was widespread in the ancient world.
It was.
But what did it look like in Athens specifically?
So slaves in Athens did all sorts of work. Okay. Everything from hard labor in the mines and fields to domestic service in wealthy households.
Wow.
They had no rights and were considered property, completely at the mercy of their owners.
It's hard to square that with the whole concept of Athenian democracy.
It's a paradox that historians have wrestled with for centuries.
Right.
And let's not forget about the medics, the foreigners who lived in Athens.
Right. Athens was a major center for trade and attracted people from all over the Mediterranean.
Yeah, while medics played a vital role in the Athenian economy, they were denied citizenship and any political rights.
Really?
They had to pay taxes and serve in the military, but they couldn't vote or hold office.
So a system of tiered rights and privileges with Athenian male citizens at the top.
Exactly.
Okay.
The Golden Age wasn't quite so golden for everyone.
It seems like a much more complex picture than we often imagine.
It definitely is. When we talk about the achievements of 5th century BC Athens, it's important to acknowledge the complexities and contradictions that existed within their society.
Okay.
It was a time of incredible progress, but also deep inequality.
It's a much more nuanced perspective than we usually get.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the full picture.
It is.
Yeah.
So we've delved into the political system, the economy, the cultural achievements, and the social inequalities of 5th century BC Athens.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah.
But I think it's time to circle back to the Peloponnesian War.
Okay.
And understand how it ultimately brought an end to Athenian dominance.
Yeah, that's where we're headed next.
Okay.
The Peloponnesian War was a pivotal event that changed the entire course of Greek history.
Right.
And it's a story packed with twists and turns, military blunders, and political scheming.
It sounds fascinating.
It is. It's a war that deserves its own deep dive.
Absolutely.
And luckily, you've given us plenty of sources to work with.
All right, listeners. Buckle up.
Yeah, get ready.
We're about to take you to the heart of the Peloponnesian War.
To the heart of it.
A conflict that would reshape the ancient Greek world.
It changed everything.
And leave a lasting legacy.
Absolutely.
On Western civilization.
A lasting legacy.
Let's dig in.
Let's do it. So the Peloponnesian War, which broke out in 431 BC. Essentially boiled down to this clash of two very different military strategies.
All right.
Athens, with their powerful navy and control of the seas, they aimed to wear Sparta down over time, a war of attrition.
So instead of, like, head-on confrontation, they would use their naval superiority to chip away at Sparta's resources.
Target Sparta's allies. Disrupt their trade networks. And essentially force them to give in.
So kind of like a slow bleed.
Yeah, a slow bleed, exactly. Sparta being a land-based power with a formidable army, they wanted to invade Attica, the territory around Athens, and force a decisive battle.
So the classic land power versus sea power scenario.
What were some of the key moments in this long and complex conflict?
What happened?
Well, in the early stages of the war, Pericles' strategy seemed to be working. Athenian ships were raiding coastal towns, and their superior city walls protected them from those direct Spartan attacks.
So advantage Athens, at least in the beginning?
It seemed that way, yeah. But then disaster struck. A devastating plague swept through Athens.
Wow.
Thousands died.
Really?
Including Pericles himself.
Wow, that must have been a huge turning point in the war.
It was a major turning point. Yeah, Pericles' death created this leadership vacuum. And Athens started making some critical strategic mistakes.
What kind of mistakes?
One of the biggest was the Sicilian expedition in 415 BC. Athens, hoping to conquer the island of Sicily, which was rich in resources. They sent a massive fleet and thousands of soldiers.
That sounds incredibly ambitious.
It was ambitious, but it was also poorly planned and ultimately a huge overreach.
Oh, so it backfired.
It backfired spectacularly. Yeah, the expedition ended in complete disaster.
Wow.
The Athenian forces were defeated.
Really?
Their ships were destroyed. It was a massive blow.
I can imagine. How did that loss affect the balance of power in the war?
It was a catastrophic defeat.
Okay.
That weakened Athens significantly,
okay.
both militarily and financially.
So they lost a lot of people.
Yeah, they lost a lot of people. They lost a lot of ships.
Okay.
They lost a lot of money.
Okay, so it really tips the scales.
It tipped the scales. It gave Sparta the opening they needed to gain the upper hand.
So the tide had turned in Sparta's favor.
The tide had turned Sparta, now with the help of Persia, built up their own navy and started challenging Athenian control of the seas.
Wow. So they were really taking the fight to Athens at this point.
They were.
How did Athens respond to this new challenge?
They continued to fight.
Okay.
But they were on the defensive now.
Okay.
The war dragged on for years.
Really?
With both sides suffering heavy losses.
Okay.
But with their resources dwindling and their morale shaken, the Athenians were struggling to hold on.
Was there any hope for Athens at this point?
There were moments when it seemed like they might turn things around.
Okay.
They won some key naval battles.
Okay.
But those victories were short-lived.
Okay.
Sparta's persistence, combined with Athens' own internal divisions and strategic missteps, eventually led to their downfall.
It must have been a difficult time for the Athenians.
It was.
Yeah.
After decades of war, Athens was finally defeated in 404 BC.
Okay.
Spartan forces took the city, bore down their famous walls, and imposed harsh terms of surrender.
So they really made them pay for this defeat.
It truly marked the end of an era for Athens.
It did.
Yeah, the Peloponnesian War brought the Golden Age to a close and signaled the decline of Athenian power.
Right.
The entire Greek world was devastated by the conflict.
Okay.
And it left behind a legacy of resentment and division that would take generations to heal.
It's a tragic end to a period of such incredible achievement.
It is.
What are some of the bigger lessons?
Yeah, what can we learn from this?
We can learn from this epic conflict.
I think the Peloponnesian War teaches us a lot about power.
Okay.
About the dangers of overconfidence.
Right.
And about the fragility of even the most successful societies.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So Athens' defeat is a stark reminder that power is never permanent.
Okay.
Even the strongest empires can collapse under the weight of their own ambitions or crumble under pressure from external threats.
So no matter how powerful you are, things can change.
Things can change quickly.
Okay, what about the dangers of overconfidence?
So Athens, especially after Pericles died, made a number of decisions based on hubris, an overestimation of their own abilities, and an underestimation of their enemies.
Right.
Those decisions proved to be disastrous.
So a reminder to stay humble, even when you're on top.
Stay humble.
Okay.
Yeah, and finally, I think the Peloponnesian War shows just how fragile even the most successful societies can be.
Okay.
Decades of conflict shattered the Greek world, leaving behind a legacy of division and instability.
A sobering thought.
It is.
So while we've spent a lot of time marveling at the achievements of 5th century BC Athens, we also need to acknowledge the darker side.
Yeah, the darker side of their history.
Of their history.
The inequalities, the internal divisions, the ultimately self-destructive decisions that contributed to their downfall.
It seems like they had all the pieces.
They did.
For success. Yeah. And then it all kind of unraveled.
It unraveled, yeah.
What stands out to you as we look at this period?
For me, it's the importance of balance. Balance between individual ambition. And the common good.
Right.
Balance between military strengths and diplomacy. Balance between innovation and tradition.
Yeah, it seems like there are.
Athens excelled in so many areas.
There's a lot of parallels to today's world as well.
Yeah.
What about you? What stands out to you the most?
What strikes me is how relevant the lessons of 5th century Athens still are today.
Yeah.
You know, we see echoes of their story in our own world. The struggles for power, the tensions between different systems of government, the challenges of maintaining a cohesive society in the face of internal divisions and external threats.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
That's fascinating.
How these events that happened thousands of years ago do still resonate with us.
Yeah. They still speak to us.
So strongly today.
Absolutely.
We've explored the political system, the economic foundations, the cultural brilliance, and the social inequalities of 5th century BC Athens.
We've covered a lot.
We have covered a lot.
Yeah.
But I think we need to zoom back in on the Peloponnesian War.
All right.
And really understand how this conflict ultimately led to the end of Athenian dominance.
Let's do it.
Okay.
The Peloponnesian War is such a pivotal moment in history.
Yeah, it really is.
It deserves a closer look.
Let's do it.
Okay, we'll be back.
We'll be back.
After a short break.
After a short break.
To unpack the key battles, the strategic blunders, and the ultimate outcome of this epic struggle for power.
All right, so the Peloponnesian War, it was a conflict that really reshaped the ancient Greek world.
Yeah.
It's a story of ambition, strategy, and ultimately the limits of power.
We left off talking about those different military strategies.
With Athens focusing on their naval power and Sparta relying on their strength on land.
Yeah.
It seems like such a classic showdown.
A classic matchup.
Right.
And early on, it looked like Pericles' plan for Athens.
Okay.
That war of attrition might actually work.
Okay.
But then came the plague, followed by a series of miscalculations and defeats that shifted the balance of power.
One of those major miscalculations being the Sicilian expedition.
The Sicilian expedition, yeah, that was a turning point in the war.
Right.
Athens, aiming to conquer that resource-rich island of Sicily.
Right.
They sent a massive force, thousands of soldiers, a huge fleet of ships.
Okay.
They thought they could cripple Sparta by cutting off their grain supply and gaining a strategic foothold in the Western Mediterranean.
It sounds like they overestimated their own capabilities.
Yeah.
Maybe underestimated the challenges they would face.
That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
The expedition was poorly planned and ultimately disastrous.
They faced fierce resistance from the Sicilian cities.
Okay.
Particularly Syracuse, which was allied with Sparta.
Right.
The Athenian forces were defeated. Yeah. Their ships were destroyed.
Wow.
Thousands of soldiers were killed or captured.
That must have been a devastating blow to Athenian morale.
Oh, yeah.
And their resources.
It was a catastrophic loss.
Okay.
It weakened them both militarily and financially.
Right.
And it gave Sparta the opportunity they needed to really turn the tide of the war.
So how did Sparta capitalize on this Athenian setback?
Sparta, with financial support from Persia, started building their own powerful navy.
Oh, wow.
They realized they couldn't defeat Athens without challenging their dominance at sea.
So they realized they had to fight fire with fire.
Exactly.
How did Athens respond to this new threat from the Spartans at sea?
They fought back, of course. But they were on the defensive now.
Right.
The war dragged on for years.
Wow.
A brutal back-and-forth struggle.
There were moments when it seemed like Athens might regain the upper hand.
Okay.
They won some key naval battles.
Okay.
But those victories were short-lived.
Okay.
Sparta's persistence, combined with Athens' own internal political divisions, a series of strategic blunders, and the exhaustion of their resources after decades of war, they simply couldn't sustain the fight any longer.
So what ultimately led to their defeat then?
It was a combination of factors. Sparta's relentless pressure, Athens' own internal political divisions, a series of strategic blunders, and the exhaustion of their resources after decades of war. It was really death by a thousand cuts. So how did it all end? In 404 BC, Spartan forces, led by the brilliant general Lysander, captured Athens. They tore down the city walls, a powerful symbol of Athenian strength, and imposed harsh terms of surrender.
So they really made a statement. It's almost hard to imagine such a powerful city-state being brought down like that.
It's a reminder that power is fleeting.
Yeah.
Even the most successful societies can be vulnerable to internal divisions, strategic miscalculations, and the relentless pressure of determined adversaries.
That's a good lesson for today's world.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into 5th century BC Athens, what are some of the biggest takeaways?
It's a period that continues to fascinate.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's the enduring relevance of their story. It's a story about the complexities of democracy, the seductive nature of power, and the fragility of human achievement.
It really is.
It's a story that can teach us as much about ourselves today as it does about the ancient world.
I think that's a brilliant point.
Yeah.
We've explored the triumphs and the tragedies of this period.
Yeah.
We've seen how Athenian democracy, for all its flaws, laid the groundwork.
Laid the foundation.
For so many of the political systems we have today.
Yeah, their influence is undeniable.
Right.
Yeah.
We've marveled at their art.
The art and architecture.
Their architecture, their philosophical innovations.
It was a remarkable period of creativity.
It was.
Absolutely.
But we've also seen how even a society as brilliant as 5th century Athens could be brought down by hubris.
Hubris will get you every time.
Right. Internal divisions.
Internal divisions, external pressures.
And the unpredictable times of war.
It's a cautionary tale.
It is.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into 5th century BC Athens.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration of history.
Until next time.
So stay tuned. All aboard, everyone. We're about to embark on a deep dive into one of the most iconic journeys imaginable.
The Trans-Siberian Railway.
You got it. That steel ribbon stretching over 5,700 miles, spanning 8 time zones, connecting Europe and Asia. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
We've got a mountain of articles and notes thanks to you listeners, so we're going way beyond the usual touristy stuff.
Buckle up for the history, the impact, and some seriously surprising facts about this railway.
Exactly. I, for one, am ready to get my learn on. Expert speaker, what's got you hooked from the get-go? What's grabbed your attention already?
You know, it's those what-if scenarios that really make you think. Like, imagine if they'd taken a completely different route. What if they built the railway south through Kazakhstan?
Oh, wow.
Or even more wild, what if they'd gone north using that BAM line?
It's crazy to think about.
The whole map of Siberia, how it developed, everything could have been totally different.
Siberia as we know it would be unrecognizable. Okay, let's rewind the clock for a second.
Yeah.
We're talking late 19th century Russia. Set the scene for us. What was Siberia like before this epic railway project? I mean, what kind of challenges are we even talking about here?
Okay, so picture this. Vast, unforgiving terrain.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Winters that would make even a penguin shiver.
Not at all.
And transportation. Forget your bullet trains. We're talking for a good chunk of the year, frozen rivers were the roads.
Wow.
Talk about hardcore infrastructure.
No kidding. So I can see why a railway, even one that seems impossibly ambitious, would start to sound like, well, maybe not a good idea, but certainly a necessary one. But this wasn't just some small-town project. Were there doubts about pulling it off, about connecting continents with a railway?
Oh, absolutely. You can't exactly revolutionize transportation without ruffling some feathers along the way. There was a ton of skepticism, bureaucratic hurdles everywhere you looked.
I bet.
It's like the classic story of a bold idea battling against, well, everything.
Resistance at every turn. But they persevered. They actually did it. So give us a sense of the sheer scale of this thing. What kind of manpower, what kind of resources are we talking about to even attempt something like this?
We're talking 62,000 workers, for starters.
Wow.
7 different sections being built at the same time.
Simultaneously.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine the coordination involved in that?
It's mind-boggling. I can barely get my act together in the morning, let alone coordinate 62,000 people.
Right.
And the funding. This must have taken a king's ransom, right?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Enter Baron Hottinger.
Okay, who's this? The moneybags.
Basically, he was a Parisian banker.
Parisian, all the way from Paris.
Yep, and he was crucial in securing the funds for this whole thing. Which just goes to show you, even back then, this wasn't just some internal Russian project.
The whole world was watching.
Exactly. The world was watching and investing.
From Paris to Siberia, that's quite the global investment. But it wasn't just about laying down some tracks, right? I mean, this railway transformed Siberia.
100%. This wasn't just a transportation project. It was a catalyst for massive social and economic change. Think about it. Millions of peasant migrants suddenly had a way to get east to Siberia, totally reshaping the demographics.
Wow, a human wave, just like that. Was this mass migration encouraged, though? Did the government orchestrate this?
It was kind of both. It's like the railway makes it easier to move, but it also opens up all these new possibilities. Imagine, Siberia is like this huge untapped frontier, right?
Wild West.
Exactly. Full of potential, especially if you're someone looking for a fresh start. So it was this perfect storm.
A recipe for a population boom, for sure. So the Trans-Siberian wasn't just a railway, it was practically a giant social experiment. And what about the economy? I mean, we're talking about connecting markets across continents here, right?
This is where it gets even more interesting. Remember those frozen rivers we talked about? The ones that were basically trade routes for part of the year.
Right, those hardcore trade routes.
Well, the railway just threw gasoline on that fire.
Supercharged everything.
Exactly. Suddenly, Siberian grain was flooding the market westward, high volume, low cost.
I can already see the dollar signs, and not everyone's happy about it.
Oh, you got that right. Imagine you're a farmer closer to Moscow, you've been doing things a certain way, and suddenly, boom, you've got Siberian farmers undercutting your prices.
Economic chaos.
Total chaos. So what happens? Well, that's where you get things like the Chelyabinsk tariff break.
Catchy name. What's that all about?
Basically, it was a tariff wall built to protect central Russian agriculture from being completely swamped by this wave of cheap Siberian grain.
So the railway didn't just connect markets. It picked winners and losers.
It did. It shows you how powerful this steel ribbon actually was, how deeply it impacted everything.
A lot of power for something that's just, tracks.
It's true. And we haven't even touched on the engineering marvel that is Lake Baikal.
You're right. That's a story for the ages. Get ready to dive into the depths of how they tackled that geographical giant right after this quick message. Don't go anywhere. The Trans-Siberian's wildest ride is yet to come.
All right, Lake Baikal, this thing's a beast.
No kidding.
Over 400 miles long.
That's huge.
Incredibly deep, and for a good chunk of the year, frozen. Solid.
Solid.
Trying to bridge that with 19th century technology.
Yeah, that's
basically giving Mother Nature the middle finger.
That's a bold move. So what do? Build a bridge out of ice.
Okay, get ready for this.
Okay.
They built not one, but two gigantic ice-breaking ferries. The SS Baikal and the Angara.
Get out.
Talk about making a statement. These things were purpose-built to conquer those frozen waters.
Ice-breaking ferries, seriously.
Yeah.
That sounds even cooler than any cruise ship today. These behemoths were built just for this railway. Where did they even build ships that massive back then?
Okay, get this. They built them in England.
In England.
Then they took them apart, piece by piece.
Wait, so they shipped a whole ship in pieces?
Yeah.
Across continents?
And it gets wilder. Those disassembled ships traveled all the way to Siberia, and then they put them back together on the shores of Lake Baikal. Imagine the logistics of that.
That's next-level engineering. I'm picturing these massive ferries crunching through the ice.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to get across Lake Baikal on one of these things?
Picture this. You're bundled up, maybe catching glimpses of the frozen shoreline through the snow as the ship's going. The trip took about 4 hours.
4 hours. Just across a lake?
Yeah.
Were there, amenities? Do they have those little ship casinos?
I doubt there were slot machines, but
Okay.
I bet you those dining cars saw some epic card games. Imagine the stories those walls could tell.
They should have had a whole brochure. Come for the Trans-Siberian Railway. Stay for the 4-hour ice-breaking ferry card game.
Right. But eventually they did manage to build a railway line around the lake.
Oh.
The Circumbaikal line. It was no walk in the park, though, that's for sure.
I bet. So we've talked about this wave of migration, the economic earthquake.
Yeah.
But the Trans-Siberian was around for some major conflicts, too. World wars, even.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin with that part of the story?
Well, the Russo-Japanese War in the early 1900s. That's a good place to start. The Trans-Siberian, which was already this symbol of ambition, of progress, suddenly it becomes a lifeline, but also a vulnerability.
Wait, how so? I would think a railway would be a huge advantage in a war.
It's a double-edged sword, right? See, back then it was mostly a single track line.
Oh, wow.
So trains going opposite directions, constant delays, they'd have to pull over onto these tiny sidings to let each other pass.
Oh, man.
One historian, he described it like this giant slow-motion traffic jam, troop movements, supplies, everything slowed to a crawl.
So strategically vital, but not exactly built for speed when it mattered most. Did that have a real impact on how the war played out?
Military historians still go back and forth on that, but that limited capacity, it meant Russian forces were often under-equipped, outnumbered. The Japanese, meanwhile, they had shorter supply lines that gave them an edge, the whole thing. It really showed how crucial logistics are in modern warfare.
Brutal, but important lesson. But the story doesn't end there, does it? We're talking about the 20th century here.
No.
Full of conflicts.
Oh, absolutely. World War I, it was a vital supply route for the Czechoslovak Legion and the Allied forces. But World War II,
yeah,
that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm ready for it. Hit me with the historical curveball.
All right, so it's a time of shifting alliances, right? Strange bedfellows. Remember, at the start of the war, Hitler and Stalin had that pact.
Right, right. Before things went sour.
Exactly. And the Trans-Siberian Railway, it was a key part of that whole pact.
Wait, you mean the same railway that helped move troops against Germany in one war?
Was now supplying them in another.
Yeah.
Exactly. The Soviets sent raw materials westward to Germany, including rubber. This lifeline, it flowed right along the Trans-Siberian, fueling the Nazi war machine. It's crazy how history works sometimes, isn't it?
Talk about a plot twist, like something out of a spy movie. But it wasn't all about war, right? What about the people caught in the middle of it all, the refugees?
You're right. While the war raged on, the Trans-Siberian also became a beacon of hope for people fleeing a Nazi-occupied Europe. Imagine, you're escaping a war zone, your whole life's packed into a single suitcase.
It breaks your heart thinking about it.
And this steel ribbon, it's your only hope.
Were there any stories that really stood out to you from that time?
One that always comes to mind is about this mathematician, Kurt Gödel.
Gödel.
Yeah, a brilliant mind, fleeing persecution, and he escaped on the Trans-Siberian. Can you picture it? Crammed into a train carriage with hundreds of others, all fleeing towards this uncertain future.
Wow.
It really puts things in perspective.
It does. The Trans-Siberian, connecting continents, fueling conflicts, offering hope in the darkest of times.
It's incredible when you think about it. And you know what? It's still going strong today.
Okay, now I need to know more. What's the Trans-Siberian's role in our world, this hyper-connected, globalized world?
Hold on to your hats, because the journey isn't over yet. We'll be back in a flash to uncover the Trans-Siberian's modern-day adventures right here on The Deep Dive.
And we're back. Still chugging along on the Trans-Siberian Express, so to speak. But expert speaker, last time we left off on a bit of a cliffhanger. What's the Trans-Siberian's deal in the 21st century? Is it still a vital trade route, or is it more like a relic from a different era?
Oh, it's definitely not just a museum piece. The Trans-Siberian, it's still a crucial artery for Russia, for sure. Connects this vast, geographically sprawling country, keeps trade flowing.
Right, makes sense. But how efficient is it really? Like, are we talking old school, chugging along, or has it kept up with the times?
So get this. Sometimes shipping goods on the Trans-Siberian can actually be faster than sending them by cargo ship.
No way. Seriously?
Especially for time-sensitive cargo, it can be surprisingly competitive.
Huh. I would have thought ships were just the default for anything long distance.
They have their place, but the Trans-Siberian, it offers this land-based alternative, right? And it can be really efficient, all things considered. Plus, they're constantly trying to make it even better. There's this whole plan they've got called Trans-Siberian in 7 days.
Trans-Siberian in 7 days.
Okay.
That sounds like a reality show I'd watch.
Right. The goal is to get a train from the Pacific all the way to, the western border of Russia in just 7 days.
7 days? That's incredibly ambitious. How are they even planning to pull that off?
It would require a complete overhaul, like upgrading tracks, faster trains, the whole 9 yards. But it just goes to show you how important this railway still is, even in the age of, airplanes and container ships and all that.
Yeah. It's like this steel ribbon that's become a symbol of Russia's ambitions. And not just the past, but the present and future, too.
Oh.
But zooming out for a second, how does the Trans-Siberian fit into the big picture now, globally?
Well, think about it. In a world that's completely obsessed with globalization, the Trans-Siberian's this very real, very tangible link between Europe and Asia. It's a conduit for everything. Goods, resources, even cultural exchange, when you think about it.
It's more than just a way to get around that. It's like this, thread connecting cultures.
Exactly. And like any good story, it makes you wonder what comes next.
Yeah.
How will the Trans-Siberian evolve as technology changes, as the world changes? It's exciting to think about.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the future of, everything. But sadly, that's all the track we have time for today on the Trans-Siberian Railway. It's been quite a journey. Expert speaker, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us. It's been a wild ride.
Anytime. I'm always up for talking trains.
And listeners, thanks for hopping on board with us for this deep dive. We'll see you at the station next time for another fascinating journey. Until then, safe travels.
All right, so get ready, because today we're going to tackle a real head-scratcher. The Fermi paradox.
Oh, yeah, the whole where's everybody question when it comes to aliens.
Right, exactly. You sent us this Wikipedia article about it, and wow, it's got some seriously mind-bending theories in there.
It really captures the imagination, doesn't it? I mean,
it does.
When you look up at the night sky, knowing there are billions of stars,
right,
and many of them are way older than our sun, and probably similar, too.
Right.
Some of them got to have planets, and some of those planets got to be kind of like Earth. So, statistically speaking, someone should have stopped by now.
Exactly. Like, even if just a tiny percentage of those Earth-like planets ended up with life, and that life, eventually built spaceships or whatever, shouldn't the galaxy be like a busy highway by now?
That's the heart of the Fermi paradox. It makes us think about our assumptions about intelligence, about technology, about what a civilization even is. Like, is there something stopping life from becoming interstellar? Something that keeps civilizations from going the distance, so to speak?
Yeah, like a cosmic roadblock, which is where that whole great filter idea comes in, right?
Exactly. Think of it as a cosmic obstacle course or something. It might be that life starting up in the first place is just super unlikely, that leap from non-living stuff to living stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe it's evolving complex cells or intelligence or figuring out how to use tech to travel between stars. Each of those steps could be so hard to get past that most life just doesn't make it.
Okay, now that's kind of spooky. But this Wikipedia article you sent, it doesn't just stop there. It's got all these other possibilities, and some are even wilder.
Well, what's interesting is that the Fermi paradox isn't really about aliens not being out there. It's about what we assume about them. Like, we assume any civilization that's advanced would want to talk, to reach out across space, right? But what if they don't?
What if they just don't want to talk? Why, though?
Well, imagine you're a super advanced civilization, millions of years old. You've seen it all. Maybe you see these young civilizations like ours and you're like, maybe not.
So they're like trying not to disturb the beehive, even though bees are super interesting.
Good analogy. Or maybe it's not about us being annoying. Maybe they learned that telling everyone where you are is, well, dangerous. Like yelling in a dark forest. You don't know what's listening.
Whoa, okay, that's giving me chills. So are we talking about a galaxy full of these super smart civilizations all hiding, afraid to make a sound?
Maybe. Some call it the Great Silence. Everyone's listening, but nobody's talking.
Yeah.
Or, and this is where it gets really cool, maybe they are talking, just not in a way we'd get.
Not with radio waves? Then how? Like telepathy? Or space smoke signals?
Well, think about it. Radio waves, they're what we use for long distances, right?
Yeah.
But they're messy, not that efficient. What if a really advanced civilization, they figured out something better, faster, more accurate, something we haven't even discovered?
Okay, you're blowing my mind now. The article did mention using neutrinos. Is that even possible, sending messages with those?
Neutrinos are wild.
Yeah.
They're these tiny particles that don't like to interact with anything much. Super hard to even detect them, let alone use them to talk. But imagine if someone did. Their messages would be flying right through planets, stars, everything, and we'd never know.
That's incredible. And a little creepy. So we could be surrounded by alien chatter and not have a clue.
It's possible. But even with radio waves, space is just so huge it's a problem. A message sent from across the galaxy, even at the speed of light. Thousands of years to get here.
So even if we heard an alien hello, by the time we said hello back, they could be gone, moved on to a new galaxy or something.
Exactly. The universe's size makes contact less likely, but it also means there's still a chance, no matter how small, that somewhere out there, some planet, some star, there's someone else looking up, wondering if they're alone too.
It really makes you think about how much we just assume, like everyone communicates like us. But hold on, the article also said, and I know this sounds crazy, maybe we are the strange ones.
Ah, the rare Earth hypothesis. Always a good one. It suggests that for complex life to happen, like here on Earth, the conditions might have to be just perfect. Way more rare than we think.
Like the size of our planet, the moon's gravity, even that asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, it all had to line up just right. Maybe that's not a coincidence, but those were vital steps to get to intelligent life.
Exactly. What if that kind of stuff is normal? Planets getting smashed up over and over. Life never gets a chance to become more than just simple cells.
That's both humbling and kind of terrifying, We sit here thinking we're so smart, but maybe we just got lucky. Really, really lucky.
It does make you wonder. And if we are that unusual, what does that mean for life out there in the universe?
Are we going to be the universe's awkward, overachieving kid, the one who showed up to the party way too early? Or are there others, maybe even more advanced than us, just waiting for the right time to say hi?
Now that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the Fermi paradox, for all its possibilities, doesn't really give us an answer. But it does offer something else, something valuable.
Okay, what's that? You can't leave me hanging.
It makes you think, right? The Fermi paradox isn't about a neat answer. It's more like this giant question mark hanging over everything.
Yeah, it really makes you think outside the box. Like all this stuff in that Wikipedia article, it's wild.
Exactly. You've got the more, I don't know, realistic possibilities like space being so vast or communication being hard. But then, bam, you've got these crazy theories that sound like they're straight from a movie.
I know, right? Like, what if these super advanced aliens, what if they're not even stuck in the physical universe anymore? Like they've moved on beyond bodies, beyond spaceships, beyond anything we can even imagine.
You know, that is mind-blowing, isn't it? A civilization so advanced, they're not limited by the physical world anymore. Maybe they're pure energy, pure thought, traveling faster than light, experiencing reality in ways we can't even grasp.
Whoa, hold on. So we're talking like cosmic beings made of thought, zipping around the universe, checking out the fabric of reality itself. I can't even wrap my head around that.
Me neither. But it does make you wonder, like, where's the limit of intelligence, of technology? Could a civilization really get so advanced that the physical universe is, well, kind of beside the point?
It's enough to give you an existential crisis, haha, but it's also like super exciting to think about. The possibilities are endless. But hey, before we go too far down the rabbit hole, the article does have some simpler explanations for the Fermi paradox, too.
Absolutely. Sometimes the biggest mysteries have surprisingly simple answers. Like, what if we're just not looking the right way? Our tech for finding aliens, even the best stuff we have, it's still limited, you know?
Right, like trying to listen to a symphony with your ears covered. You might hear a note or two, but you're missing the whole thing.
Exactly. And we're basing our search on what we understand, right? Technology, communication. What if we're looking for the wrong clues? What if they're using stuff we haven't even dreamed up yet?
So it's not just finding a needle in a haystack. We don't even know what the needle looks like.
Exactly. And even if we found a signal, there's still distance and time to think about. Imagine getting a message from thousands of light years away. By the time it got here, that civilization might be long gone. Or maybe they're so advanced they don't even see us as intelligent anymore.
Oof, yeah. It'd be like sending a letter and waiting centuries for a reply.
And who knows, maybe they did reply, but we haven't been around long enough to get it yet.
So it's this weird thing, right? The universe is huge and ancient. We're just a blip on the radar.
And yet, that blip, as small as it might be, it can still think about itself as big questions about its place in all of this. That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
So we're like really small, but we can still think about all this, huh?
Right. It's kind of wild.
It is. Okay, so it sounds like this Fermi paradox thing, there's no easy answer.
Nope. More like a giant what if out there in the universe.
Yeah, but that's what I kind of like about it, you know? It makes you think big. Like all that stuff in that Wikipedia article, it really gets the gears turning.
It does, doesn't it?
Like, what if, okay, this might sound crazy, but what if these super smart aliens, what if they're not even, physical anymore?
Not physical.
Yeah, like they've moved on from bodies, from spaceships, from anything we can understand.
Whoa. Okay, so like they're beyond our comprehension.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine a civilization so smart, they're not limited by the physical world. Maybe they're just energy now, pure thought, zipping around faster than light, seeing things, experiencing things we can't even imagine.
Wow. Okay, I'm trying to picture that. So like cosmic beings made of pure thought.
Right. It's wild.
It really is. But it does make you think, like, how far can intelligence go? Could you really get so advanced that the universe, like all this around us, it doesn't even matter anymore?
I know, right? It's like an existential crisis waiting to happen, haha. But it's also kind of exciting, The possibilities are just endless. But hey, before we go too far down that road, the article did have some simpler explanations for the Fermi paradox, too. Remember those?
Oh, right. Sometimes the most complicated things have simple answers.
Totally.
Like, what if we're just looking in the wrong way for aliens? All our fancy tech, it's still got to be based on something, right?
Yeah, and our understanding of things.
Exactly. What if they're like using frequencies we can't even detect or something like that? We never even know.
It's like we don't even know what we don't know.
That's it. It's not just finding a needle in a haystack. It's like, what if we don't even know what a needle is?
Okay, now my head really hurts.
I know, right? And even if we did pick up a signal, think about it. Those distances, that message could have been traveling for thousands, millions of years, right?
Yeah.
Who knows what that civilization, assuming it's even still a civilization, is like now? Maybe they're not even sending signals anymore. Or who knows, maybe they are, but we've got to wait another few thousand years to hear it.
It's like trying to have a conversation with the speed of light, haha.
Right. So what does it all mean? We're just this tiny blip in a giant universe.
A tiny blip that can ask big questions, though.
Exactly. And maybe that's the point of the Fermi paradox. Even with no answers, it gets us thinking about our place in all of this. It reminds us that there's so much out there we don't understand, and that's okay.
It's more than okay. It's amazing. It keeps things interesting.
I agree. Keeps us humble, too.
Yeah, that too. So even if we never know for sure if there's anyone else out there, well, at least the search is pretty cool, right?
Absolutely. Who knows what we'll discover along the way.
Yeah. Exactly. Well said. All right, everyone. Until next time, keep looking up and keep those brains buzzing.